Jumping back in here to part two, I'd just say, in a nutshell, it would have made the process here, the non-renewal process, if you will, a lot easier if the administrator had provided some feedback and some improvement strategies for the teacher and had some of those things documented and prepared for this situation. Probably wouldn't be quite as sticky of a case study. So as we look at this, we're kind of, again, we're going to get into a mess one way or another, so it really becomes what kind of mess do we want to actually have to clean up. It's important as we look at this to see, who's all really affected by something like this or this decision. Obviously, students are affected in this decision. I think, a lot of times you can get kids that really like a teacher. They might be, affected one way or another, but most of the time they're pretty resilient, in regards to that. Now, the other thing or the other aspect of that, talking about students being affected, is we all know that effective instructional practices are key to achieving desired student outcomes. And when you have teachers that are not engaging students and motivating students and getting student success or getting the kind of results that we're looking for, then it does become kind of an issue and something that we need to address. Now, I don't know that a non-renewal is the way to handle that right away, but definitely actionable feedback, definitely professional learning opportunities, creating a positive work environment so that those teachers are receptive to those things. Other teachers could be affected by this type of situation. If you go ahead and do the non-renewal without having all of these other safeguards in place and all of these other measures to try to help the teacher, then you really set yourself up for a poor climate and a work culture. So that's something that we have to be careful about, not getting carried away with emotion and making sure that we do the right things to set our teachers up for academic success and to prepare them to support our students in all aspects of what that means. Our school district also has a role to play in this, and I think something they need to consider through this process is, are the systems that we're putting in place appropriate, and are we constructing systems that are actually objective and measuring and doing what we expect them to do? And in this case, I do not think that is true. Mrs. Stevenson obviously is impacted by this, and a non-renewal on your teaching or on your resume or your teaching background definitely does not look good, and will make those situations harder, or will make it harder to find a job in the future. Through the presentation here, we talked about a lot of things missing and how much easier these things would be if we had a little bit more insight into some different things. But I definitely think it would be helpful to know how many years Mrs. Stevens has been in her assignment, or how many years she's been teaching there. All we know is that she was 1 year away from tenure. We don't know if this is her first year teaching, she's been there a couple years, or whatever the case might be. I know it does change, a little bit of the perspective. She's been there for a while and hasn't really gotten any support, and now all of a sudden these things are just now coming up. Or what were those observations like in year 1 and 2? Is it the same thing, and we just kind of rode out the storm to see if anything would change? Kind of crossing our fingers, because it definitely doesn't sound like the administration was very actionable or deliberate in any planning or goal setting or providing support for the teacher, to be honest with you. I'd also like to know, like I said, what those previous evaluations held, who actually did the evaluations, and if at that time Mrs. Stevens was open to that feedback. I think what really put that wall up for her was not having feedback and not having regular communication and not working in an environment that values collaboration and growth. And it just didn't seem like that was kind of the vibe that I got anyway. Can a decision made? I think a decision can be made. I think there's not really any turning back. When I first looked at this, I felt like once you say you're going to non-renew, you probably have to follow through. And you'll see later in this presentation that my opinion kind of changed a little bit with that. The more I did research and looked into different things, and the more I reflected on the lack of support that it appears that Mrs. Stevens did not receive. And again, some of that is a result of not having more information in the case study. So it comes down to this. Does she stay or does she go? I thought it was kind of funny, made me think of that song, so I put a little lyric sheet in here for you, comedy entertainment. So here's the deal: if she stays, that involves retracting the evaluation, and retracting the recommendation for a non-renewal. That can become a pretty messy situation, and definitely probably going to be eating some crow at some point in time. But it could be a good thing too. If she does stay, it confirms that she has some valid points about a lack of support, and not being able to work or have somebody support her for improvement. Now, if she does go, nothing really changes. We're still kind of where we were at, where we started, and again, we're in a mess either way. So it becomes really boils down to what mess do you want to deal with? How does one mess affect the stakeholders versus how another mess does affect everybody involved? And then also, what is the desired outcome at this point? Which option provides you with the best possible outcome? And I know, again, that they both provide a little bit of stickiness within themselves, but which one has the best possible outcome? And in order to determine that, I think we need to figure out what's best for everybody. I think if she stays, it definitely shows some humility. It shows that we are going to start to shift to show some support for school improvement. It shows a growth mindset from the top down that, hey, maybe I was wrong. I think we can all grow from this and move forward. And it can but it could also negatively set the tone for all teachers that it's okay to underperform, and we're not going to do anything about it. So again, a little bit of a double-edged sword there. If she does go, I think it sets the tone, good or bad, that teachers are replaceable. And then I think what you do is you get teachers looking for other jobs, that you get teachers that are not necessarily feeling empowered and comfortable in their positions, and then that could result in a lot of other problems. It can result in negative unwanted attention in the district. People are like, hey, you don't want to go work there. They don't help and support their teachers. They just get rid of them if they're not doing a great job. It could provide a lawsuit possibly in different situations. I don't know that there's a lawsuit in this situation, but there's some potential for that in the future if you don't find ways to improve your observation systems and support teachers along the way. Either way, I put this in here at the end. The evaluation system used in this case study definitely needs improvement. It lacks the objectivity. It doesn't provide a big picture. It doesn't provide any specifics or details outside of the fact or outside of the brief mention in the principal notes about poor classroom management and lack of student engagement. I'd like to get more information and more insight into instructional strategies, what we're doing, goal setting, what was actually happening in the class at the time. Maybe it was a time for teachers to be talking to each other. We don't really know. I think there's just too many unknowns, and I think a lot of those unknowns come back to the lack of information provided in that evaluation form. And so here we go. I'm changing sides. So originally I started, and you probably didn't really gather this from my presentation, but originally I was like, you know what, Mrs. Stevens, you're out of here. Not doing a good job. We're going to find, somebody else to fill your position, do a little bit better job, and get students engaged and motivated and learning and having a higher success rate. The more I thought about this, the more I started to reflect and think that, well, it would be good to just swap that out and have a great teacher come in and do a great job and not have to worry about anything else. The fact of the matter is you still have to worry about other things. The fact of the matter is the grass isn't always greener on the other side, and it is hard to find new teachers, and it is hard to find teachers that are committed to a building or a place. And once you start letting people go without providing structure and supports and guidance and professional learning opportunities for those teachers, then you set again that bad reputation up. People do not want to come work for you. People don't want to be in your building, and then the culture and the climate of the building just literally begins to pummel and become in this big downfall. And so I think the negative aspects of letting Mrs. Stevens go without trying to remedy this situation and provide her with supports, and show a little bit of humility and just be there to support her, I think would go a long way. And I also think it would set the tone for the rest of the staff that, yeah, this individual is willing to admit when they're wrong, they're willing to have our back, and they're willing to help us out. Now, the biggest hurdle in this whole situation and eating the crow is obviously going to be, how do we get Mrs. Stevens to buy back into, no, we're actually here to help you, after we just had this big kind of blow up, if you will. So how do we do it? I think we have to remedy the situation. I think that comes through some one-on-one conversations. Again, I think that comes through eating a little bit of crow, like we talked about. Express the principal's faults. Provide some actionable feedback that's solution oriented. But I think you also have to be clear with Mrs. Stevens that, hey, I was wrong, but you also have a little bit of ownership in this as well, and I need you to be open-minded to working with me to moving forward. And I think that you and I can work together to set a tone for the rest of this building, that we are going to stick together through thick and thin, and we are going to be focused on a growth mindset, and we are going to be doing everything that we can to increase student achievement here at this school. And again, once Mrs. Stevens obviously starts to develop that relationship, hopefully, the ability to receive feedback becomes more and more. And I think the problem with the lack of receptiveness to the feedback is originally probably because there wasn't a whole lot of feedback, and then all of a sudden you're hearing, well, we're not going to bring you back, and of course that would definitely create some barriers for a lot of people. This could blow up though. She may not want to have that conversation. She may not want to make amends and move forward and set the tone for the rest of the building and work collaboratively, moving forward and helping her improve and helping even myself improve in that situation. So I think you have to a little bit during that conversation. I think you have to have a little bit of a conversation with Mrs. Stevens that I need you, if we're going to move forward with this and remedy this situation, I need you to be open-minded and collaborative and open to feedback and willing to grow and willing to help me grow. And I think if you can paint a bigger picture that this is bigger than you and I together, that this is our building and our students. And most teachers do care about student success, whether they're a great teacher or they're struggling. They do care about kids, and they're in this because they want kids to be successful. So if you can touch that part in the teacher's heart, if you will, then I think you can remedy that situation and move on and have a much bigger impact in the building. A few references here. You can take a peek at that. I appreciate your time. It was a great couple weeks here. I haven't done one of those quick courses, so that was intense. Again, I appreciate your time. Hope you enjoyed the presentation. I hope you enjoy the rest of your summer.